Welcome back, everyone. I welcome you to Shadows of the Unknown. I won't talk much, as many people don't like too much talking anymore. Honestly, these days, I even feel scared to talk. Anyway, we are starting today's episode. First, let me share our email address, hoodalop@gmail.com. Please subscribe to our channel so you can always get all the updates. And since we are now uploading new stories regularly on YouTube, I need your support. Please don't go to any fake channel to listen to our stories. You are getting new content here, so there's no reason to go elsewhere. So, I suggest you subscribe to avoid any confusion with fake channels. We will be motivated, and you will inspire us to continue moving forward together. Now let's proceed to today's first story, which I will read as it is written. Assalamu alaikum. I will share with you an incident that happened to me, and I am writing it today with a request for you to share it on your channel so that no other girl has to go through such an experience. I want no mother-in-law to do these things to her son and daughter-in-law, especially not by using black magic. A mother-in-law should treat her daughter-in-law like her own daughter, so their relationship remains as pure as that between a mother and daughter. To some women in society, I am telling you through this story, please do not view your son's wife as a stranger. She is not an outsider. She should be treated like your own daughter, which is the only way to have a beautiful family. There are still many women who suffer from their mother-in-law's oppression but cannot do anything about it. Even if they seek legal help, they don't benefit from it. And for middle-class girls like us, the idea of going to court or the police station is unthinkable, as it only brings shame and dishonor to the family. Due to problems, I am keeping my identity hidden. I am not sharing this just for the sake of telling a story, but because we have a social responsibility to share this incident. Let's see what he says next. I got married right next to my parents' house on December 28, 2016. It was a love marriage, and we had the blessings of our families. My in-laws' house is just one house away from my parents' home. At the time of our marriage, my mother-in-law was abroad in another country. I was living with my husband, my father-in-law, and my brother-in-law. My husband's younger sister was already married long before. It's worth mentioning that my husband was a classmate of my elder sister, so there was quite an age difference between us. Another important thing is that my husband had been married once before. He had a daughter from that marriage who was about 7 or 8 years old at the time. His first wife had left for Saudi Arabia about 2 years before my marriage, and they got divorced. She didn't take her child with her, and the child was staying with her grandmother in Rangpur. After my husband's divorce, 2 years later, I married him. However, my family was opposed to this marriage because I was an unmarried woman and he was a divorced man. That's why we got married secretly, without telling anyone except for my father-in-law. We got married at my sister-in-law's house. The first year and a half went well, but suddenly a dark chapter began in my life. In 2018, my mother-in-law returned to the country. At first, everything seemed fine. However, it should be mentioned that my mother-in-law didn't like me very much because of my dark complexion and my family's modest financial situation. She had been opposed to this marriage from the beginning. Initially, she treated me well, and I was overjoyed to have a new mother figure in my life. I didn't notice the hatred and anger hidden behind her mask. My mother had passed away when I was very young, in 2008, so I never experienced a mother's love and affection. Before my mother-in-law returned, my husband and I had minor arguments from time to time, but there were no major issues. No matter how much we quarreled during the day, at night, we would always forget our anger and reconcile. However, after my mother-in-law came back, things began to change. My husband no longer enjoyed any food unless it was cooked by me. To this day, he still prefers my cooking over anyone else's. Since my parents' house was nearby, I never stayed the night there because I didn't want to be separated from my husband. One day, a massive argument broke out between me and my husband over a trivial matter. It's important to note that my husband's first wife stayed in touch with my mother-in-law, sister-in-law, and brother-in-law. They would often talk and visit each other regularly, but I had never seen my husband talking to her. About 15 to 20 days after my mother-in-law returned, my husband secretly started communicating with his ex-wife again. One day, I realized that my husband seemed a little distracted, but I didn't say anything. My mother-in-law would sit right in front of me and talk to my husband's ex-wife, but even then, I didn't mind, nor did I protest. Despite this, the dark chapter of my life began in 2018, bringing only sorrow and pain. My mother-in-law would tell me things like, "Why don't you go to your parents' house for 4 or 5 days?" But since my parents' house was nearby, I would say, "Why would I go home for no reason? I don't like going, and your son doesn't want me to either." Because of these comments, sometimes my husband and I would argue. One day, after an argument, I left for my parents' house. The whole day passed, and at night, I thought maybe my husband would come. I cooked food for him and sat in the room waiting, but midnight came and he didn't show up. I called him a few times, but his phone was switched off. I thought maybe he was angry and had turned it off on purpose. After finishing my Fajr prayer, morning prayer, I returned to my in-laws' house, only to find my husband still asleep. I continued my usual household chores and went to the kitchen to cook. Just then, my mother-in-law came out and asked, "Why are you cooking so early?" I replied, "Mother, I woke up early, so I thought I would start cooking." Then she asked, "When did you come back?" I replied, "Just a little while ago." 2 or 3 days passed, and like a storm, extreme unrest entered my married life. My husband seemed unable to even look at me. One day, he physically assaulted me, and at some point, preparations were being made for a village council to decide on our separation. I learned that my mother-in-law had spoken to a very influential person in the village, asking him to ensure our divorce, even offering to pay for it with the money from the dowry. She knew that if my husband divorced me, he would return to his first wife and remarry her, securing her son's wealth, which he had earned while living abroad. When the village council convened, they asked me what I wanted to do, whether I wanted to return to my marital home or go back to my parents' house. I had been severely beaten and was quite ill at the time, but even then I said, "No, I will return to my in-laws' house." I believe marriage happens only once in a person's life, and mine had already taken place, so no matter how difficult things became, I wanted to go back. So I returned home. The villagers escorted me back to my in-laws' house, but my mother-in-law was furious because she hadn't wanted this outcome. So she secretly went to a nearby village called Mosho, where there was a witch doctor who performed various harmful acts like separating couples. She told him about me, and he said she would need to bring some of my hair and some of my personal clothing. My mother-in-law knew where I threw my hair away and where I kept my clothes for cleaning, so she used those opportunities. I can't even express how much pain I've endured since then. On November 5th, 2019, I suddenly couldn't stand the sight of anyone from my in-laws' house, and I stopped talking to my husband. It felt like I was suffocating in that house. My father began to suspect something because, despite the beatings, I had insisted on staying at my in-laws' house before, but now I was desperate to leave. My father spoke to my elder sister's mother-in-law about the situation, and she mentioned a religious healer in a village called Jadab. My father wasted no time and went straight to this healer, Sheikh Mohammed Zahir Udin. The healer said that black magic had been used on me, specifically designed to make me leave my husband voluntarily. Hearing this, my father asked if anything could be done. The healer said yes and gave me a talisman to wear on my left hand, instructing that I should never remove it. That day was a Tuesday. My father brought the talisman and tied it to my hand. After that, I stayed in my in-laws' house for about a week. On November 11th, I woke up one morning to find the talisman missing. I became frantic, searching for it everywhere. After about an hour, something came over me, and I packed my clothes and left for my parents' house without telling anyone. When I arrived, my father asked if there had been another fight. I replied, "No, there was no fight, but I'm not going back." Without telling anyone, I went straight to Nariel and contacted a lawyer to prepare divorce papers for my husband. Somehow, my father found out I had gone to court and followed me. He asked the lawyer not to proceed with any legal documents. In secret, my father had a fake divorce paper prepared and showed it to my in-laws to reveal my mother-in-law's true intentions. Afterward, my father took me back home. I thought maybe my husband would come looking for me, but to my surprise, he didn't. He didn't make any effort to contact me or check on me. The next morning, I heard that my mother-in-law was trying to find the divorce papers. She came to me and said, "You've already divorced him, so why haven't you sent the papers yet?" I stared at her in shock and said, "I didn't divorce him. I went to file for divorce, but my father stopped me." Hearing this, my mother-in-law became furious and left. She sent my husband to my parents' house later. When he arrived, he scolded me and began beating me again. 2 months passed, and I didn't return to my in-laws' house. From my parents' home, I could see them every day, but they paid no attention to me. Eventually, I became like a lifeless body. One day, I went back to my in-laws' house. When I arrived, everyone acted normally, and no one showed any anger toward me. My mother-in-law even called me to eat, and my husband went to get medicine for me from the doctor. I don't know what my mother-in-law gave me to eat, but since that day, I've never fully recovered. I stayed at my in-laws' house for 2 days, and then one day, I noticed that a string bean plant on our roof had died. I initially thought it might have dried out from the sun, but it was the rainy season, so there was no reason for the plant to wither like that in a single day. Later, through the healer, my father found out that the witch doctor had placed a spell on me to make me leave my husband of my own free will. However, the talisman the healer gave me had counteracted the effects of the black magic. I cried a lot for a while, and then he told me that he would take something very valuable from me. After a while, I lost consciousness. I told my father, yes, I agree. My father then said, I can do anything for my daughter so that her life gets better, so that she recovers. The thing that was taken from me was my eyesight. He, the jinn, would take my vision, and I would see as dimly as a 50 or 60-year-old elder. In exchange, he would make me healthy. I cannot tell you the rest of the story, Brother Russell, because I have never forgotten that dreadful moment in my life. I still can't sleep at night because that scene keeps haunting me. Even today, from 2019 to 2022, I still can't see clearly. I can't read books. I can't even cut my nails properly because my vision is so impaired. I have shown myself to many top doctors, including at the Islamic Eye Hospital in Dhaka, Sheikh Rehana Eye Hospital in Gopalganj, and Bangladesh Eye Care Hospital in Khulna. I even went to Madras, India, for eye surgery, which cost me 600,000 taka. Despite all that, I still can't see properly. I am sending this message to you with great difficulty by typing through voice command. I sincerely apologize because I didn't realize why my writing seemed a bit disjointed earlier. Now I understand. It's because I used voice typing. That's why my writing feels a bit scattered in parts. But I am very grateful to you for allowing me to share this story with you, and I am praying for you. I pray that you recover fully. He, the person who told the story, shared this event with me and then said, Brother Russell, I don't know how low people can sink to do such horrible things. I still pray for my mother-in-law, asking Allah to guide her. Since that day, my husband has changed significantly and now takes very good care of me. We've moved from my in-laws' house to Dhaka, and we're renting a place there together. However, I have no children. I don't know if my mother-in-law still curses me, as I haven't had any children yet. I continue to pray to Allah, asking Him to guide her. My father was preparing to file a case against my in-laws, and he gathered many witnesses to testify. That day, when the healer was asked who had harmed me, he revealed the name of the person, the witch doctor, my mother-in-law had gone to for arranging everything. I believe in Allah, and I know that one day my mother-in-law will accept and understand me. I live with that hope even today. He concluded his story, saying, Thank you so much for sharing your life story. It is a deeply personal and emotional experience, and it's clear from your writing how much emotion you have put into telling it. I pray that you stay well, recover fully, and that your heart's desires are fulfilled by Allah. Now we will move on to the next part of today's episode. I hope you will enjoy it. I'm reading it exactly as it's written. Assalamu alaikum. Dear listeners, I hope you are all doing well. This is Sohag, Every day, I listen to Shadows of the Unknown USA on YouTube while drifting off to sleep with my headphones on. I always feel like writing and sending in a story, but since I haven't experienced anything myself, I never did. However, I once heard a story from my uncle, so I decided to write it down. Please forgive any mistakes or errors in the story. This is a true story that happened to my uncle. Since my mess was close to my uncle's house, I would often go there on Thursday nights and return to the mess the next day. One Thursday, my uncle called and said, "Your little uncle is coming to our house. Come over and we'll have food and chat." So I quickly got ready and went to my uncle's house. My little uncle, my middle uncle, and I sat down for a chat while my aunt was cooking in the kitchen. During the conversation, the topic of paranormal activities came up. My uncle then shared a true incident that had happened to him just a few days earlier. I was immediately intrigued and excited to hear the story. The event occurred about 3 years ago. My uncle was riding his bike, returning from 250-bed hospital in Kulna, heading towards Sonadanga. Just before reaching Raushnara Clinic, something strange happened. The bike was going at a speed of about 30 kilometers per hour. My uncle was driving, and there was a man sitting behind him. They were talking as my uncle rode the bike. It was around 7:30 in the evening, during wintertime, so the roads were almost deserted. It was quiet everywhere, and the entire area was shrouded in fog. Far-off road lights flickered faintly through the mist, barely illuminating the road ahead. Suddenly, a dog leaped from the divider in the middle of the road and jumped right in front of the bike. The man sitting behind my uncle shouted, "Dog!" and my uncle clearly saw the dog jumping too. My uncle pressed the hydraulic and foot brakes and brought the bike to a stop. The man behind him tumbled forward, hitting my uncle, and his helmet hit the ground, breaking his glasses. Fortunately, there were no moving vehicles behind them, so they narrowly avoided a major accident. My uncle got off the bike and started looking for the dog. He was sure the dog must have been seriously injured from the impact. But strangely, there was no dog anywhere. Not on the road, not around the area. My uncle was certain the dog had jumped in such a way that it couldn't have gotten up and run away quickly. The man behind him also started searching for the dog, looking at my uncle with a puzzled expression. Suddenly, they heard an elderly man calling from the side of the road. He said, "Son, what are you looking for? You won't find it." My uncle replied, "A dog jumped in front of the bike, but I can't find it now. Where could it have gone?" The old man smiled slightly and said, "You are lucky you didn't get seriously hurt. Go home while repeating Allah's name. You narrowly escaped a major accident." Shocked, my uncle continued to search for the dog. The old man said, "You won't find it? It wasn't a real dog. Many people see such things here." The old man's words were strange and ominous, so my uncle didn't ask any more questions. He quickly started the bike and left. However, fear had already gripped him. His hands and feet were trembling, and it became difficult for him to control the bike. His body was shivering, and despite the cold winter night, he was sweating profusely. The man sitting behind him noticed my uncle's condition and tried to comfort him, but the fear was overwhelming. My uncle kept repeating the name of Allah until he finally reached home. After that incident, my uncle didn't ride his bike for a whole week. Even now, whenever he rides his bike at night, he feels like the dog is about to jump in front of the bike again. This was my uncle's true story. If necessary, I can provide a link to the Facebook post where this experience was shared. Many people confirmed the authenticity of this incident in the comments. Others had experienced similar things in that area. Upon investigating, we discovered that there is a graveyard near that spot, and many people have encountered strange creatures or figures while passing by at night. That was the true story of what happened to my uncle. Thank you very much, Sohag, for your story. It's clear that you've worked hard to write and share this with us, and I deeply appreciate the effort.